So this is our week 3 of our Buddhist Studies class on cultivating wholesome relationships. Glad that many of you were able to make it to the live stream. And we'll go to about 8:30 or maybe a little bit later. And then Gabe Keller-Flores will help us transition to small group meetings, and he'll take care of that at his end. So do what you can to find a comfortable sitting posture for the meditation time. Some of you have the Buddhist Refuges in memory, and we'll do that chant together slowly as a way of beginning. For those who don't know the 3 refuges, just listen along. Try to remember to send that link out next week with the email, the weekly email for the Buddhist Studies class. So let's begin. Buddhang Saranang Gacchami Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Sanghang Saranang Gacchami Dutiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami Dutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. And just transitioning into our sitting time, whether the body feels settled or not, with the mind, whether or not the mind is settled, like it or not, we are all in relationship now with our life, consciously or unconsciously. So recognizing this in relationship, this relating. And recognizing if there are qualities of greed, qualities of aversion, qualities of distractedness, whether or not they're qualities of love, kindness, patience, this wisdom of acceptance, allowing the conditions to be. Notice what kind of commitment there is. This commitment to be present with the body as it actually is. Is it a weak commitment? Heart's not really committed, not really into it. Or whether we have a deep value, a resonant commitment of wanting to be here, connecting with the sensations of the sitting body, the breathing body. Does the heart value this relationship with the body? How might this mind relating to the body, how might it mature now, this time, into something that's healing and beautiful, enlivening, in a very real sense? Let's let this be our primary responsibility now and then in an ongoing way. Taking responsibility for relating to our life, relating to the experience of the body sitting, relating to the quality of the heart here in a way that feels healing and real, onward leading toward more peace and ease and a deeper sense of well-being. So in this way, in this very immediate way, we're investing in this primary relationship, the heart, knowing the life of this body, this breathing body, this sensing body right here, right now. And of course, we're going to notice all of our patterns, wanting to give up on this project, on this relationship. It's too hard. I'm just going to be betrayed. There isn't really anything here of value. Or we might notice a controlling tendency. But if we simply continue to observe the way the heart is relating, we'll find our way moving in the direction of relating more and more skillfully. Because it simply hurts. It's stressful to not be relating in skillful ways. But we need to be aware, honestly feeling the quality of the relationship. So each time we need to begin again during this 30-minute set, see if you can remember that this heart right now is in relationship, is relating to this life. Most importantly, most obviously, the life of this body. The quality of the heart. Right here, right now, it's like this. And the question that arises out of compassion: how can I show up? How can I relate in a way that's healing? How can I keep showing up in a way that leads to a deepening of understanding and wisdom, a more full releasing, the dropping away of stress? And this is how we all learn to value mindfulness, this mindful presence, because in this very real and direct way, we discover that it's really the foundation of all healing, this balanced, clear, and kind presence with our life as it actually is. We're willing to gift our life this beautiful presence, this continuity of awareness. And we don't need to figure anything out. It's much more of an abiding or bathing this life with this simple, generous presence. And notice how the goodness, the love, the kindness naturally begins to well up, this very simple, expansive quality, generous quality of presence, goodness, that's willing to hold or bathe or meet the body, the tender, sensitive heart, just as it is right now. And at times, maybe spilling over and this generous, expansive quality, feeling a warmth, a love for those around us, those who we are in relationship with, like friends and family, pets. This very natural and inclusive quality of the heart, of love and awareness, to include. Yes, this too. And we're simply learning to trust this expansive generosity of the heart, the good heart. And this generous quality of awareness of the heart, it knows how to make space for whatever shows up. Distractedness or reactivity, negativity. Oh, yes, this too belongs. This is how it is sometimes. So we're in this very simple way, we're learning how to meet our life. We're learning how to be in relationship to this dynamic experience of the body, the heart, and mind right here. How to be tender, how to be a loyal friend, how to reflect truth back to ourselves when that's what's useful and helpful. How to be affectionate with oneself. how to meet our own pain, meet our own confusion. We don't want to miss this opportunity to learn how to take care of our life, to learn how to be a good friend. And we'll notice that sometimes we need to be quite firm. Something like, I really want to be here, even if it's uncomfortable. I really want to see and feel things as they are now. I don't want to be distant or disconnected. That doesn't work for me anymore. Or this way, then I'd be okay. But we want to get to know these patterns, these words or statements that disguise or hide an old wound, some pain, so that we can learn how to come into relationship with the pain itself. So we can really learn how to meet our life and all its brokenness, all its beauty, all the sorrow, whatever it is, undefended. Learning to have a real relationship. So that it can become a model for all the other relationships in our lives. So, how are we treating our body now? How are we relating to the sensitive heart? How do we relate to the thinking mind? And even though we may not be there yet, probably aren't there yet, we can aspire and deeply resolve to become a good friend of this life, to become a very wise and loving friend of this life here, this body and heart and mind. I'm not going to give up. I deeply resolve to become a good friend, to learn how to take care of myself in the deepest way so I can take care of everyone. So when you feel ready, you can allow the eyes to open. You can begin to adjust the body, stretch out any way you need to. So welcome everyone. You probably are recognizing a new room. Some of you real old timers will maybe recognize this as the original Common Ground Meditation Center from 1993 to 2008. We met in this room, and then now it's been the last 12 years or so the home for Win and Mark. And at the last minute, we realized that the internet wasn't working at the center, so Scott and I are here with Win, my partner, Common Ground's co-founder, and really looking forward to continuing our study of wholesome relationships. And tonight we'll have small groups beginning a little bit after 8:30. We'll talk you through that when we get there. And you know that we've been, realizing that the heart, the mind's relationship to the present moment really is the model for all of our other relationships. And all the difficult learning we've had over our lifetime, and all the places we've yet to learn, all the ways we've yet to learn how to be a good friend to this body, this life, this heart and mind. This is what gets in the way of getting along with our partners or our pets or the people at work or neighbors, etc. But the real dynamic is that, however off our way of being, our way of relating has been today, we have right now, right? So here, listening to Mark in this sort of awkward setting, staring at a computer screen, just so happens that this is our life. So how can I show up in this community with these people, with my own heart here? How can I show up in a way that's enlivening? I mean, a lot of what we learn is what doesn't help. Wanting something to be over is not an effective way to be showing up in any moment. It's insulting in a way. And a lot of what we learn, this is from the sheet that I sent a couple of weeks ago, the principles for wholesome relating some notes that I wrote up a few years back. Just this discovery that we're actually mostly in relationship to our own concept of, the other person or our own concept of ourselves. So it's a very dynamic thing. We're not stuck, however, difficult a moment of relating, a relationship might be. It's not over. And the next moment, it can be something very different. And to really learn how to relate in a beautiful way, a healing way, we have to learn to respect our needs for safety and comfort and realize that every other being has these same deep needs for safety and comfort. And there's no way to take that off the table. It's always going to be in the moment. Our needs and everybody's needs for safety and comfort. And all the toxic power moves that we've played out or have been played out toward us, they're just somebody trying to be comfortable and somebody trying to be safe. So we just have to acknowledge that that's always going to be, it's always going to be part of what it means to be alive, to be human. Another one of the principles that we want to, this is number 4 for people who have the sheet in front of them or have read it. And this relates to the other article I sent you by John Wellwood about relationships as a crucible. I don't know if you know this, but crucible, it's like a cauldron where you can heat up metals. And it's sort of a place, a way of purifying. So we want to acknowledge our relationship to ourselves, our relationship to the moment, our relationship to everybody else. We really want to see it as a teacher, because if we don't put it in this perspective, then we're generally going to fall into the habit of my relationship to this moment, my relationship to you and everybody else. It's about me getting some comfort, me getting some safety. We're trying to extract something from it. And that first week, we talked about, this deep tendency to be stingy and hungry. And there's no denying that we are hungry and we are needy, but we can understand that and we can learn to feel what that feels like, to be needy, to be afraid, to be insecure. When we know how to be close to those feelings, we don't have to act as if they're not acceptable. I need to make them go away. So I'm going to use my relationship with you to make that yucky feeling going away, to make that yucky feeling go away. I think, I forget when it was, but a while back, I think it was Joko Beck, this wonderful Zen teacher. She's died now maybe 10 years ago. She's written a couple wonderful books. Joko Charlotte Beck is her name. And I believe it was her who had this really powerful image of ice, water, and vapor. And as, in those times when we're living our life as an unpracticed and unwise human being, which, unfortunately is a lot of the time, we're like ice. We exist as ice. We have the potential to be vapor or water, but right now we're solid and hard and cold. And we have to actually, and as an ice cube, the way that I can relate to myself and relate to others, well, it's limited. How can a ice cube, that sense of separation, that sense of being apart, of being solid, me being cold and needy, it's sort of all I know. And then if we're lucky, we get reminded that, there is this iciness, but it isn't the whole truth. There are other possibilities. And we get inspired, to take up the practice. And at times, there's a little melting. At times, maybe even something as free and light as vapor. And this is the thing, because we can go, vapor can turn back to water and water can be frozen into ice. So this is just the nature of our existence, to live along the spectrum. We can be a very tight, fearful, needy human being. And in that moment, that may be what has to be met. That's how it is. But it's not over. And we can learn how to live in a way that warms things up, loosens things up, and frees things up. And that's really this cauldron, this crucible of our life, and this crucible of all of our relationships. How can we use relationships, relating as a teacher that loosens and frees up the heart, as opposed to how can I get what I think I need from my relationships? And this is sort of, just to keep it simple, the difference between being a worldly person and being someone who's relating, seeing relationships in terms of a spiritual path, a path of awakening, a path of freedom. This is a passage from John Wellwood wrote a book. The article I sent you was not from this book. It's from some magazine, but it covers some of the same territory. But if you want to go in more depth, there's this book, Perfect Love, Imperfect Relationships. And the subtitle is Healing the Wound of the Heart. And this is from this book, where he's really talking about, just the fact that we human beings tend to be wounded, in all the different ways, because we brought to our relationships a kind of hope, that the relationship is going to save us or fix us or give us what we think we need so we can finally feel safe and comfortable. And then, of course, we end up feeling betrayed. And that hurts. And then we want to get away from that pain of feeling betrayed. And but we're still in relationship. So one of the things that happens, and John Wellwood has written quite a bit about what he calls spiritual bypass, and you probably have heard this phrase, spiritual bypass, where we're using our spiritual practice to avoid the very ordinary and real pain that just comes with being a human being, looking for love in all the wrong ways, in all the wrong places, trying to get something we're never going to get from another person or from a community. As nice as love, as loving relationships can be, they will never save us. They will never give us the security we think we need and want, right? Because relationships aren't secure. They're wild. Two wounded human beings, being together, it's not solid ground. So this is what he writes. The attempt to use spiritual ideas and practices to avoid dealing with emotional unfinished business, notably our woundedness around love, usually has disastrous consequences, especially in the West, frequently leading to psychological imbalance and destructive behavior. My term for this kind of disassociation and denial is spiritual bypassing. Often we deal with our disconnection from love through one of two extremes. Emotional denial is one of them, trying to rise above our wounding through worldly achievement or spiritual transcendence. And in parentheses, he writes, a popular male choice. Or emotional fixation, becoming endlessly preoccupied with relationship as the source of all happiness, a popular female choice. In this book, I'm proposing a middle way between these two extremes. Through appreciating the relative significance of personal love, while also recognizing that it can never contribute to absolute ease and satisfaction. There can be no doubt that healthy relationships contribute to human happiness. There can be no doubt that healthy relationships contribute to human happiness. Yet this happiness ultimately arises from our capacity to connect with what is most real and true within us, which a loving relationship can help put us in touch with. So, a simple way of summing that up is we often go into relationship, have children, fall in love, develop friendships, committed relationships, teamwork. We often go into relationship thinking we're going to find something that's healing, something that we need. But if we're lucky, what we find there in our more healthy relationships is this opportunity to discover this heart is capable of love, of loving, of being love. And maybe you even touched into it in the meditation tonight, just tapping in or touching into this capacity of our heart to be generous and alive and giving. It doesn't mean that neediness is gone. It just means that we are okay with neediness and woundedness and whatever else that we find deep in the heart or on the surface. But we're choosing to notice, pay attention to this capacity to care for ourselves and to care for others. This capacity to be, that expansive. We use the word a radiant heart, but there's something really wise about that word radiant because it has a real sense of lightness and an effortless expansive quality. And we can learn to actually meditate both in daily life, but also formally in a meditation time, to meditate on this expansive and generous quality of the heart. And it really challenges how we tend to look at pain like a feeling of betrayal, not really having been met by another person or seen by another person, acknowledged by another person. And the pain of that, we can, the habit is to sort of, the mind gloms onto it because it fits a deep grievance pattern, a story that has a lot of, has been repeated so many times that it's like a deep groove. I had this a couple moments during the day today. Once again, like when we discovered, that at 10 minutes after 7 or whatever it was, that there was no internet at the center, and it was like we've been going through the hoops with CenturyLink, our internet provider, over these last few weeks. It's just been really frustrating. So once again, like, oh my God, can't count on anybody. These relationships, because yesterday it was working fine. 2 people came from CenturyLink. We had a nice connection. They seemed to do their job. They seemed to know what they were doing. And then, betrayal. I knew I shouldn't have thought I could count on them. So even in a superficial thing like this, the mind really wants to dwell in the grievance pattern. The oh, poor me. People can't be trusted. Or I'm going to transcend the messiness of relationships. Or I'm going to sort of fix it. I'll find the right kind of relationship. Maybe it's Xfinity. Or maybe, whatever. Some other internet provider will be there for me and meet me and will, meet as 2 human beings and then live happily ever after. A little bit later in this book, John Wellwood quotes Bernard Phillips, who wrote in the 60s, kind of this intersection of Eastern philosophy and Western psychology. And one of the things he wrote was, every human being with whom we seek relatedness is a koan. That is to say, an impossibility. And this is the kind of a paragraph from that book. There's no formula for getting along with a human being. No technique will achieve relatedness. I am impossible to get along with. So is each one of you. All our friends are impossible. The members of our family are impossible. How then shall we get along with them? one way is to try to circumvent the difficulties which they pose by applying psychology, right? Kind of telling ourselves a story about the person. Oh, this person, like we do to people about people. Oh, it's just my mom. This is just the way my mom is, or this is my partner, and they're this way. And in a way, it gives us an excuse from really meeting them. And that's what he goes to next. He writes, this may remove the immediate difficulty, but it will not forge a relationship. In this context, we do well to be mindful of the ever-present possibility of gaining the whole world through technique, but losing our souls, that is, our relatedness to reality. If you are seeking a real encounter, then you must confront the koan represented by the other person. The koan is an invitation to enter into reality. And the Buddha was very clear, about reality, that it's insubstantial, ephemeral, unsatisfactory. It's nature. It's wild. You can't govern it. And this is really what we find just meeting our own heart, our own body, and especially true when we, do our best to connect with someone else. There's a famous sutta discourse where the Buddha's kind of giving some instruction about this, because a lot of the time we think, this is that pattern that John Wellwood mentions, either we seek transcendence, get me out of here, no more dependence on relationship, or we seek dependence, let me figure this out, let me fix this, let me make it right. So the Buddha gives this simile of the acrobats. And I guess back in the day, the time of the Buddha, they'd have this wandering show of some person. I think in this case, it was the grandfather would maybe have a bamboo pole on his shoulders or on his head. And then his granddaughter would climb up while he was balancing the bamboo, and they do some kind of show that way. And so they were doing their routine, and the bamboo acrobat, the granddaughter rather, this is the grandfather talking to the granddaughter, right? So she's on top, and he says to her, right, and he's the master, he's the older of the two, you look after me, my dear, and I'll look after you. Thus, with us looking after one another, guarding one another, we'll show off our craft, receiving some payment, and safely climb down the bamboo pole. So after he said that to his granddaughter, she responded, she was pretty bold, right? Even speaking to her elder, that will not do at all, master. You look after yourself, and I'll look after myself. Thus, with each of us looking after ourselves, guarding ourselves, we'll show off our craft, receive some payment, climb safely down from the bamboo pole. That's the right way to do it. And the Buddha used that story to make this point. Like, it's not really our responsibility to fix or save. Our responsibility is to model being a happy, balanced human being that is capable of relating to whatever is showing up in the moment with wisdom and compassion. That's how we take care of everybody else, by really taking care of this moment. And in terms of this class, right, one of the things we're really tuning into is recognizing that right now, the relevant thing here right now is I'm relating to this moment. And this happens on autopilot unless there's enough balanced awareness and we realize, yeah, I'm relating to the moment. I'm relating with greed, or I'm relating with aversion or fear or a little tightness, or I'm relating in a really open and generous way. But one way or another, we're in relationship to the present moment, and it matters. And it's kind of, as I've mentioned in the past weeks, it's a little bit intimidating because, we'd rather not have that responsibility. I'll send out this article next week, but I wanted to read it. This is one of Joko Beck's students, who's now a well-known teacher, Barry Magrid, I think it's pronounced, Magid. And the article is "No Gain. Relationships won't solve our problems, but they can help us grow." And one of the things his teacher, Charlotte Joko Beck, used to say to him, a simple, pithy statement: imagine if we just reminded ourselves this over and over again. Relationships don't work. Okay? Relationships don't work. And then maybe we could add, and does that have to be a problem that they don't work? Maybe it's okay that relationships don't work. And this really helps us turn that corner. So if they're not going to work, right, maybe they have something they can sort of help us see what we need to see. So here's a paragraph here. So he's talking about how Buddhism talks a lot about dependent origination, or the interdependent causes and conditions, right? And none of us are apart from this great complex ocean of conditionality, or causes and conditions. So he was talking about that. And then he writes, acknowledging this dependency, this interdependency, is the first step of real emotional work within relationships. Our ambivalence about our own needs and dependencies get stirred up in all kinds of relationships. We cannot escape our feelings and needs and desires if we're going to be in relationship with others, right? This is our teacher, so when we enter a relationship with a cat, or we have a child, or we have a partner, or we're in relationship with someone at work, it's going to reveal to us all of those desires, all of those social needs. I mean, sometimes I might think I'm kind of cool because, I don't go to bars, or I don't go to parties very often. But the truth is, when I go to those sort of places, I feel all of this stuff that I don't like seeing and feeling. So is it that I'm like above it all, or I haven't learned how to notice all of that social conditioning and have a healthy relationship to it? Think about how many people might be staying in their intimate relationships with their partners because they can't imagine being with the yucky feeling of what comes up when you're looking for a relationship with another human being, and being in that vulnerable place. Same thing. How many people are staying with their jobs because they don't know how to be with that yucky feeling of being judged when they're looking for a job, or having to kind of paint a picture for another human being when they're interviewing for a job. So all of our different relationships, like when we are meeting somebody and they're sizing us up, right? And we know that they're sizing us up. So it's bringing to the forefront all of what that feels like to be sized up by another person, to be judged, somebody turning us into a thought. Okay, this is who this person is. Well, what do we do with that? Because that feeling is not in the other person, it's in us, right? That yucky feeling, whatever it is, we tend to project it onto them. That person is making me feel insecure. But the insecurity is right here in our own heart. And this is what the point I made right at the beginning, the first week, is that so much of what we're in relationship with in life isn't exactly the other person. It's our hearts, our minds, its own constructions, and often neurotic constructions, because of how we've been conditioned. And this is the interdependent dance. And there's only one way forward, which is to start to see more honestly all of this stuff. And so then in this way, we really begin to understand and appreciate we need relationship, we need engagement, we need this world, the messy and imperfect world. We often think, in a kind of stereotypic way, we might think people who have kids, oh my God, how are you going to go on Buddhist meditation retreats? How are you going to sit every day? You've really blown your practice having kids. And then it turns out they become really wise. And those of us without kids are wondering, oh, maybe we took the wrong turn. And in a way, this sort of, oh, it's a lot easier not having kids. It might be a lot easier not having kids, but if there's a right attitude, there's a lot of deep spiritual learning when we're, entrapped in these life circumstances, whatever it might be, whatever the circumstances might be. So to continue reading this before we break into small groups, to be in relationships is to feel our vulnerability in relation to other people who are unpredictable and in circumstances that are intrinsically uncontrollable and unreliable. This is probably sounding familiar. And then he goes on, we bump up against the fact of change and impermanence as soon as we acknowledge our feelings or needs for others. Basically, we all tend to go in one of two directions as a strategy for coping with that vulnerability. We either go in the direction of control or of autonomy, or we go for control. We either go in the direction of control or autonomy. If we go for control, we may be saying, quote, if only I could get the other person or my friends or family to treat me the way I want, then I'll be able to feel safe and secure. If only I had a guarantee that they'll give me what I need, then I wouldn't have to face uncertainty, unquote. With this strategy, we get invested in the control and manipulation of others and in trying to use people as antidotes to our own anxiety. With the strategy of curative fantasy of autonomy, we go in the opposite direction and try to imagine that we don't need anyone. But that strategy inevitably entails repression or disassociation, a denial of feeling. We may imagine that through spiritual practice, we will get to a place where we won't feel need, sexuality, anger, or dependency. Then we imagine we won't be so tied to the vicissitudes of relationships. We try to squelch our feelings in order to not be vulnerable anymore. And we rationalize that disassociation under the lofty and spiritual sounding word detachment, which ends up carrying a great deal of unacknowledged emotional baggage alongside its original, simpler meaning as acceptance of impermanence. Yeah, so this deep habit of disconnection. So for the small groups tonight, which will transition in just a minute or two, I thought that one of the things you might share is, and feel free to take notes if you have paper, but one of these points that I'm going to mention just might resonate with you as a way to use your time. These are really sacred conversations that we have, and we kind of commit, we do commit to keeping whatever is brought up in these small groups, just within the small groups. There's no crosstalk. We give everybody their 2, 3, 3.5 minutes, something like that. Even if somebody runs out of something to say, 2 or 3 other people in the group, you just hold that silent space, because the person who's speaking then, they might think of something to say. You could just kind of keep reflecting and have your time, and then transition to the next and to the next. And then with the remaining time, you can just have an open discussion. It's good to decide on the order. So the topics, as I was saying, that might be good is just talk about how in your own life, you've been doing a better job at normalizing that you have social needs and not thinking of it as a weakness, that I want to have physical affection, or I want somebody to talk to, or I want, when I come home or when I sleep at night, I want somebody next to me. Or maybe you have different kinds of needs, but just acknowledging those needs. Sometimes they may look like demands, but not to pathologize social needs. What are my social needs? And how are they being met and how are they not being met? Just having an honest relationship is a powerful step of getting closer to our life. We are social beings. We have millions of years of social programming, right? Genetically written in to who we are. And some of those needs, because of, just the difficulty in relationship, as I've been talking about, have kind of become these grievance patterns, like unmet needs. And then we don't like that feeling. So we tell ourselves a story about that pain, basically blaming others or blaming the world or blaming ourselves. And it can exist, that reinforced pattern can exist as a chronic go-to for the mind, a way of blaming or complaining in terms of our social relationships. So that might be something you bring up, that if some kind of grievance pattern is starting to show itself more clearly in your life, oh yeah, feeling like nobody's ever been there for me. That's one of my go-to places in my social relationships. Just places of stinginess and places of generosity in relationship. Just what does it feel like when you notice your heart's stingy? What does it feel like when you notice your heart's generous? Or another way of saying that, what, times when you've been in relationship recently that just have, for whatever reason, had a very healing quality, and then deconstruct that in your small group. I wonder why that felt so healing. And look at what were the supporting causes perhaps for that lightness or that healing that took place in those moments, being in relationship with another person or a group of people. Or maybe there were moments that felt the opposite, really toxic, really harmful. And then again, in your small group, if it feels safe, deconstruct it. What made that so toxic? And the last thing I thought that, might come up in the small groups is just asking the question out loud and then answering it during your sharing. Like, what does it mean to be intimate, spiritually intimate, or just actually intimate with myself and with another? And then what does it mean to be distant or disconnected or disassociating? So what do I know about that experience of intimacy? And what do I know about the opposite of intimacy in relationship? What comes to mind for me? So that's kind of the territory I thought might be useful for the small groups. Just a reminder that we'll again meet next week, and we won't have small groups, but we'll use the live stream chat for conversation and questions. But feel free to send in questions during the week. You can just send them to me. Most of you have my email address. If you don't, just send it to the Center for the Buddhist Studies, and I'll incorporate some of those questions in the talk and discussion next Monday. And Shelley will be teaching on Wednesday night. You could catch her live stream if you'd like. A number of other programs. You could just go to our homepage, maybe sign up for the weekly email if you're not getting the center's weekly email. That's different than the Buddhist Studies website.